Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I'm working on a book which I will be talking about in greater detail when I finish it. I'm just enjoying it and savoring it bit by bit. But I wanted to bring it to your attention because I came across close to the beginning a comment which I find so meaningful and useful and interesting as a subject for discussion of musical aesthetics that I need to share it with you. The book is called Music for Prime Time. It's by Jon Burlingame and it's published by Oxford University Press. It's a history of American television themes and scoring. And what an extraordinary story this is, actually, in the history of 20th century music. We tend to make categories about things, don't we? Classical, pop, jazz, whatever, and they're not very helpful. For those of us who are really just interested in good music or great music or any kind of music, and also the practical uses to which music can be put, how music impacts us and how we encounter it in our daily lives, which I think is a fascinating topic. Anyway, he was talking about cop shows and detective shows, and we come across on page 63, the Mod Squad. And I have to just read a little section of this for you because it is so remarkable. It tells you about how these people work, these wonderful musicians, incredibly gifted and talented people, putting their talents to use in various media, and what practical musicians do, what they think about, the art of music, and how seriously they take it. I should shut up and read it. The Mod Squad, 1968 to 73 on ABC, broke new ground in the genre, both in terms of concept and music. Michael Cole, Peggy Lipton, and Clarence Williams III played three young people who worked undercover for the Los Angeles police. The music was the work of one of the legendary figures of American television scoring, Earl Hagen. Hagen came out of the big band era. He lived from 1919 to 2008, playing for Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey. In 1939, while playing first trombone and arranging for band leader Ray Noble, he composed Harlem Nocturne, which became not only a jazz standard, but also nearly half a century later, the theme for Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer, which was on CBS from 1984 to 1987. I saw all these shows. Starring Stacy Keach. In 1946, he began a 7-year stint as a contract arranger and orchestrator at 20th Century Fox. He and fellow orchestrator Herbert W. Spencer worked almost exclusively on musicals. Two of their films, Mother Wore Tights and Call Me Madam, won Oscars for musical direction. In 1953, they left Fox and formed a partnership to provide music for the burgeoning new medium of television. Initially for The Danny Thomas Show, and later on his own, Hagen scored such TV classics as The Andy Griffith Show. You know that one, right? The Dick Van Dyke Show, I Spy, and That Girl, starring Marlo Thomas. Hagen's theme for the Mod Squad was one of the most dynamic ever, written specifically for the already shot main title visuals of Cole, Lipton, and Williams running down a darkened, rain-soaked alleyway. Its pounding beat, gutsy brass, and jazzy organ solo immediately told viewers that this was an action show. Here's where the punchline comes in. We used rock and roll in the open spots, chases, fights, and things like that, Hagen recalled. But rock and roll doesn't have any harmonic drive to it. It's rhythmic drive, which doesn't work well under dialogue. So when we got into scoring, especially scoring that had any tension to it, we went to 12-tone, an advanced form of composition developed by 20th century composer Arnold Schoenberg. Quote, with the exception of a theme that Shorty Rogers wrote for the pilot that we used for an association with the kids, that we used to finish the shows with, very melodic. The rest of the scoring was always pretty tense. 12-tone composition creates a lot of tension, Hagen explained. Fellow big band arranger Billy May also wrote many Mod Squad episodes. Well, isn't that interesting? I think it's incredible, first of all, that we have these splendidly trained musicians working in television who are perfectly well aware of dodecaphony and who regard it as simply another tool to be used, part of their arsenal to create the necessary atmosphere, tension, whatever, underscoring a crime action show. And the Mod Squad of all crime action shows, a very youthful, sort of up-tempo thing. I'm sure Schoenberg must have been spinning in his grave, but here maybe not. I don't know. I really don't know, to be honest with you. Here's the point, and this is the point. The point is that one of the big arguments that we've all had and deal with all the time is the sort of conflict between 12-tone music and normal music. Now, the normal music has won. It's won the argument. The 12-tonicists are beating a hasty retreat. They really are, although they still exist, and the technique is useful. But most of the great composers who used the 12-tone technique, they had to surreptitiously kind of say, well, okay, yeah, I used it, but I used it in this context or for this purpose. In other words, they were right. They were right back in the 1960s. In the 1960s, when, academic serialism was all the rage in serial music, when composers who didn't write, in that style were roundly denounced and spat upon, and they weren't performed, and they were treated like garbage. And, this whole, discussion was going on that was the only legitimate way to compose. Well, over in Los Angeles, in the TV universe, they had already discovered what everybody knew, which was, yeah, it's good for some things, mostly the depiction of angst. I mean, tension, misery. And the reason for that is really very simple. The reason for that is because we cannot hear 12-tone music in a non-tonal context, right? I mean, we spend our lives surrounded by music, 99% of which is tonal, and then you're confronted with this new system of writing music, which is supposed to tell us that you can express everything you can express with that other system, only in order to understand it, you have to completely forget about that other system. Well, we can't. We don't. We don't want to. We shouldn't have to. What's the point? Why should we have to relearn the entire syntax of music merely to see if we can acquire the same benefit, joy, emotional range that we already get and already enjoy and already have and has done fabulously well for hundreds of years? I mean, there's just no reason to waste our time with it. And ultimately, that's what happened. I mean, that's really what's happened, hasn't it? People have finally just said, why are we making this effort? What is the point of it all? What are these people trying to express that we can't get already with what we have? But these guys in the 1960s in Hollywood, they understood where Schoenberg was living, had lived. I mean, he died in 1953-ish, right? Somewhere around there. But, the hotbed of that type of writing. Stravinsky was still around. He was doing it. Here you have these serious music people, sagely telling us that this was the path to the future. This was the one true way. But on the other hand, you had these very talented practical musicians who are just saying, oh, yeah, we'll use that, because when they're having the dialogue about murdering the guy or taking a hostage or robbing a bank, that's what we want to hear underneath it, because that's going to create this miasma of dread. And that's what it represents. It's the miasma of dread school of composing. I just find that totally marvelous and fascinating. In fact, it really is. There are lessons here. There's a lesson there, a similar lesson I learned back in my days as a historian when I was at Johns Hopkins University, and I was a German historian, and I knew all the major German historians of the day, a lot of them anyway. Let's say all of them, but a lot of them. I studied with many of them, and I spoke to many of them. They were wonderful, wonderful crowd of people, quite a few of them, and they were all saying the same thing. After the fall of the Soviet Union and all of that stuff was going on, it was in the early 90s. I was the late 80s actually when I was out of it, but I was speaking to my professors then, and they were saying, well, the Berlin Wall is never coming down. Never in our lifetime. Germany can't reunify. It's never going to happen. It's totally impossible. And then 6 months later, it was done. And I assure you, the entire academic community was overtaken with shock in German history because world events dictated otherwise. And they had theories, and they had studies, and they had evidence up the wazoo about why the status quo was going to be maintained. And it all turned out to be complete BS, totally wrong. And they missed everything. They misjudged everything. And this is another one of those cases that is related in just the most fabulously sensible, practical, innocent way. Yeah, of course. That's what 12-tone music is. It's miserable. That's what it expresses, that you can write great, great music in that system, expressing basically misery and dread. Think about Wozzeck, think about, or Alban Berger, a lot of Schoenberg and those people, and subsequent people, George Rochberg and guys, all kinds of people who were able to do splendid things with the 12-tone system, and still do, actually, with aspects of it. Let's put it that way. But from an expressive point of view, from an emotional point of view, from a music as something that's supposed to communicate to us in a certain way, what it communicates is what we always knew it communicated: horror. And there you go. There you have it. Anyway, it's a splendid book, which I'll be talking about in greater detail in a future video. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because I just think it's the most fabulous. It's the emperor's new clothes moment, where the little boy points at them and says, "But he's naked." After all of the highfalutin talk about the aesthetics and this and that and legitimately this and musical language and where it's going and how it's headed and the seriousness and the pretension that we went through with these people with their theories, and now it's just something that you can use when you want to be miserable. Gotta love it. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take it easy.